Imagine scrolling through a feed and seeing a portrait that looks like it belongs to a movie star, a globe-trotting explorer, or even a version of yourself you've never dared to show. That instant jolt of awe, what if you could create that exact feeling with just a few clicks? In a world where a single image can open doors, shape perceptions, and even rewrite personal narratives, mastering the art of a crafted visual identity has become more than a hobby. It's a strategic skill. When you post a polished photo, people don't just see a face, they read confidence, professionalism, and a story. This is the halo effect in action. A well-edited image casts a subtle glow over everything else you say or do. That's why influencers, entrepreneurs, and job seekers spend hours perfecting their visual presence. They understand that the first impression is often visual, and a powerful portrait can tip the scales in their favor. But before we dive into the tools and techniques, let's clarify what we mean by a fake image. We're talking about a deliberately crafted representation, a portrait that has been enhanced, styled, or reimagined to convey a specific vibe. It is not a deep fake video that swaps faces in motion. It is a still image that blends reality with creative editing. Think of it as a visual resume, a personal brand badge, or an artistic experiment, anything that aligns with your goals while staying within ethical boundaries. People turn to this practice for many reasons. Some want a confidence boost, swapping out a tired selfie for a version that reflects the best version of themselves. Others need a professional headshot for LinkedIn without the cost of a studio session.
Creatives use it as a canvas to explore alternate identities, gender expressions, or fantasy settings.
And in the dating world, a polished portrait can convey the vibe you wish to attract, making the first swipe more meaningful. By the end of our journey together, you'll walk away with a clear, step-by-step workflow. How to brainstorm the persona you want to project, choose the right software, apply lighting and retouching techniques, and finally, evaluate whether the result feels authentic to you. You'll also learn the hidden pitfalls like over-editing that erodes trust, or using copyrighted backgrounds that could land you in legal trouble. Knowing when to stop is just as important as knowing how to start. Let's start with the mindset. The first question you should ask yourself is, what story does this image need to tell? Are you aiming for sleek corporate confidence, adventurous wanderlust, or a whimsical alter ego? Write down 3 adjectives that capture the essence you want, perhaps bold, approachable, and dynamic. These words become your design compass, guiding every choice from lighting to color palette. Next, gather reference material. Look at magazines, movie posters, or social media accounts that embody the vibe you're after. Notice how the light falls on the subject, the background elements, the color grading, and the level of detail in the skin texture. Save a handful of images that resonate. These will serve as visual benchmarks throughout the editing process. Now, let's talk about the foundation, the original photograph. Start with a high-resolution picture taken in natural light, preferably with a neutral background. Use a tripod or a steady surface to avoid motion blur, and make sure the camera is at eye level. A clean, well-exposed base gives you more flexibility later and reduces the need for extreme corrections that can look unnatural. With the base image ready, we move into the software selection. There are 3 main categories to consider: professional raster editors like Photoshop, user-friendly mobile apps such as Lightroom, and AI-powered generators that can reshape facial features or swap backgrounds in seconds. If you're comfortable with layers and masks, Photoshop offers unrivaled control. If you prefer a quicker workflow, apps like Snapseed or Facetune provide powerful one-tap adjustments. And for those curious about AI, tools like Midjourney or DALL and KA can generate background scenes that match your vision, though you'll need to blend them carefully to avoid a jarring look. The first editing stage is lighting correction. Adjust exposure so the face is neither overexposed nor lost in shadows. Use curves or levels to bring out contrast, and consider adding a subtle rim light to separate you from the background. A gentle, warm tint can convey friendliness, while cooler tones suggest professionalism. Remember, the goal is to enhance natural features, not to erase them. After lighting, focus on skin retouching. This is where many creators go too far, ending up with a plastic-like texture. Use a low-opacity brush to smooth only the areas that truly need it, perhaps blemishes or excessive shine, while preserving pores and fine lines that keep the image grounded. A technique called frequency separation allows you to edit texture and color separately, giving you precise control without losing realism. Color grading comes next. Apply a lookup table or manually adjust hue, saturation, and luminance to match the mood you identified earlier. If you're aiming for a vintage traveler vibe, consider muted earth tones and a slight vignette. For a futuristic corporate look, lean towards sleek blues and crisp whites. Consistency is key. The color palette should feel cohesive across the subject and any added background elements. Now, let's talk about background replacement. Choose a scene that reinforces your story. A city skyline for ambition, a beach for relaxed confidence, or an abstract gradient for artistic flair. When inserting a new background, mask the subject carefully, ensuring hair strands and fine details remain intact. Use feathering to soften edges and blend lighting so shadows on the subject match the direction of light in the new environment. Finally, evaluate the result. Step back and ask yourself, does this image feel like an amplified version of me, or does it feel like a stranger? Show it to a trusted friend and gauge their reaction. If they can still recognize you while acknowledging the enhancement, you've hit the sweet spot. If not, consider dialing back on certain edits.
What do you think about this process so far? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious about which step excites you the most and where you might need extra tips.
Now that you've run through the core edits, it's time to add the finishing touches that turn a good composition into a truly compelling visual story. One subtle but powerful technique is to introduce a slight grain overlay. A fine grain can mimic the texture of film, giving the image a timeless feel without distracting from the subject. Apply the grain at a low opacity, just enough that the eye registers it, but the details remain crisp. If you're aiming for a high-gloss corporate aesthetic, you might skip the grain altogether and keep everything razor sharp. For a wanderer vibe, the grain adds authenticity. Next, consider the use of a subtle vignette. Darkening the corners just a touch draws the viewer's focus toward the center, where your face and expression reside. Be careful not to overdo it. A heavy vignette can look dated and pull attention away from the very elements you've worked hard to perfect. Adjust the feathering so the transition is smooth, and match the vignette's color temperature to the overall mood. Warm for a cozy feel, cool for a sleek, modern look. Another often overlooked detail is the reflection in the eyes. The eyes are the windows that convey emotion, and a tiny catchlight can make a portrait feel alive. If the original photo lacks a natural sparkle, you can gently paint a small, bright spot in the upper right quadrant of each iris. Keep it subtle. Too large and it feels artificial. This tiny adjustment can dramatically increase the perceived connection between you and the viewer. When you're satisfied with the visual elements, take a step back and examine the narrative consistency. Does the clothing match the setting? If you've placed yourself against a bustling cityscape, are you dressed in a way that suggests you belong there? Small mismatches can break immersion. If you notice any discord, tweak either the outfit color or the background lighting until they harmonize.
Sometimes, a simple hue shift on the shirt can make the whole scene feel cohesive.
Now, let's address the ethical dimension of creating a fabricated image of yourself. While enhancing a portrait for professional or creative purposes is generally acceptable, there are lines you should be mindful of. Misrepresenting your appearance in contexts where authenticity is crucial, such as official identification, medical records, or legal documentation, can have serious consequences. Use these techniques responsibly, and always be transparent when the image is heavily altered, especially on platforms where trust is paramount. Adding a brief note in the caption, like "edited for artistic effect," can preserve credibility while still showcasing your creative skills. Legal considerations also come into play when you incorporate third-party assets, such as stock backgrounds or textures. Ensure you have the appropriate licenses and give credit where it's required. Some free resources allow commercial use without attribution, while others demand a link back to the creator. Taking a moment to verify the usage rights protects you from unexpected takedowns or copyright claims down the line. With the final image polished, it's time to think about distribution. Different platforms have varying optimal dimensions and compression settings. For Instagram, a square format with a resolution that balances detail and file size works best. For LinkedIn, a slightly wider crop can accommodate the banner layout and convey professionalism. When you upload, avoid over-compressing the file. A gentle reduction in quality preserves the nuances you've painstakingly crafted. If you're sharing on a personal website, consider offering a downloadable high-resolution version for fans or collaborators who might appreciate the finer details. Before you hit publish, run a quick sanity check. Open the image on a phone, a tablet, and a desktop screen to see how it translates across devices. Sometimes colors shift subtly on different displays, and what looks vibrant on a large monitor may appear muted on a smaller screen. Adjust the brightness or contrast if needed, but keep the edits within the bounds of realism you've established earlier. Finally, reflect on the journey you've just completed. From the initial concept to the final export, each step required a blend of technical skill and artistic intuition.
Celebrate the fact that you now possess a repeatable workflow that can be adapted for any future persona you wish to portray. Whether it's a sleek tech entrepreneur,
an adventurous explorer, or a stylized character from your favorite genre, remember, the goal isn't to erase who you are, but to amplify the facets that resonate most with the story you want to tell.
If you found these insights helpful, I'd love to hear which part of the process sparked your creativity the most.
Did the background replacement challenge you, or was it the subtle eye-catch light that made the biggest difference?
Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Your feedback helps shape future tutorials and ensures we cover the topics you're most curious about.